Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
Today we're going back to 1944, and we're going to look at what is probably the biggest circus disaster in American history. It occurred in Hartford, Connecticut on July 6, 1944. It was the Ringling brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus that was performing there in Hartford, Connecticut, when disaster struck. Now, Chris and I are both fans of the circus, and I believe we've done an episode in the past, Chris, on P.T. Barnum. Am I correct on that?
Yes, we have. We did a really good episode of the Big Top, and one of the things that we did not talk about is this particular event, which only you would uncover from the annals of the circus. And when I started studying it, the thing that just really hit me was the quote, this was the day that the clowns cried.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly, every once in a while, whether it's a show like Ringling Brothers, Barnum Bailey, or whether it's a smaller circus, every once in a while you'll hear of someone getting injured or sometimes even someone getting killed. But this event here, I mean, this was a major tragedy that happened there in Hartford, Connecticut back in 1944. So I guess we just sort of dive right into this one, Chris. Everybody, at least I suppose majority of our listeners are aware of Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus. Barnum and Bailey was purchased, to sort of going a little bit back here, by the Ringling Brothers in 1907. They merged it together and they sort of toured separately. And then in I believe it was 1919, they merged it together to tour as a combined show. So by the time of 1944, when this tragedy happened, Ringling Brothers had been touring as a combined show for about 25 years. And Chris, this tent that they were touring with, or these tents that they were touring with, were absolutely huge. I was very surprised that these things could hold up to 9,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly under the big top, I mean, people, if they're not familiar, because the circus kind of had a hiatus, if you will, for a little bit there, and now it's kind of been resurrected, revived, and it's really great. But usually, it's got three different rings, and those rings are all underneath one tent. And
Yeah.
I, like you, was amazed not just with the size of the tent, but also how they created the circus environment. We understand that circus performers and the circus was basically traveling all across the country, basically by rail. I mean, they would use trains to transport, and they would stop at a variety of cities, and they would then construct this huge circus tent where everything would be taken part underneath that tent. And that was part of the experience as a young person, or even as an adult. You saw the big tent, you saw the animal cages and the things like that as you were approaching. And it's kind of like when you walk into a football stadium or a college arena or something, you just got that, it's got that feel to it. And what fascinates me is how they put up these tents. I had no idea. I mean, of course, they would put them under grass, or dirt. They would have it. But, what they had was these 15-foot sidewalls, and the roof was like 48 feet tall in the air. And I was floored that they would take these, the canvas of the tent, and they would coat it with wax, which was dissolved in gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you've got the walls that are coated in gasoline, they would put hay down and wood shavings on the floor. And that would kind of be where the animals and everything else was going to perform. And then they would have basically wooden bleachers. So it really is you don't think about it in that context because you want to go to the circus and have a great time. But it is just a bomb waiting to go off if one thing goes wrong.
Yeah, it's a matchbox is all it really was. And it's amazing to me that they went as long as they did without having the problem that occurred there in Hartford, Connecticut. And you think about, who goes to the circus, women, bringing their children. I mean, husbands go, men go, but a lot of the people attending any circus performers, especially in 1944, are going to mainly be women and children. So you're filling this tent with, like you said, that gasoline material on the tent. It was also there to make it sort of waterproof. I guess so if it rained, the water couldn't get into the tent and that kind of thing. And you're putting all these people, thousands of people in there, plus animals and all of that. And like you said, you've got this gasoline material on the tent, you've got wood shavings on the floor, you've got the wooden bleachers. I've never thought about that, but Chris, that's like a matchbox.
And add to that that circus performers are extremely superstitious.
Yeah.
There's this, we've always heard any type of performer, really. I know with plays and things like that, you go out and break a leg, you have all of these things that you say, things that you do. Well, what was interesting is that the circus had arrived in Hartford, Connecticut. And by the way, this is in July of 1944.
Right.
And the trains were delayed, the trains were slowed down, that they actually had to cancel one of the shows. And so if one of the shows is being canceled, that means that basically, okay, we're going to have, the evening show, but everybody's going to try to get to that one show instead of dividing it up. And so on that day, you're looking at approximately 7,000 people crowding under, just spectators, not including circus performers, going underneath that big tent. And in circus superstition, missing a show is considered extremely bad luck. And so you just wonder if, like, some of the circus performers were thinking, okay, we've missed a show. We're underneath a big tent that is coated in gasoline. We've got wood shavings on the floor. It's stuffy because everybody is packed in. All the emergency exits are blocked by our animal wagons. Well, let's hope that we go break a leg and nothing bad happens.
Yeah. And they didn't have, of course, all the rules and everything that we have today, obviously, concerning safety in a workplace, safety in a, if you go to a show or something, safety in a theater or whatever it may be. They didn't have any of that. And I wonder, Chris, how many of the performers, how many of the people attending the show even thought about it? I know when I go to a performance of any sort, I sit down and one of the first things I do is start looking for exits, start looking for way outs, but I wonder how many of the people in this show that day, and the fact that there was many people there, it's amazing with what happens. It's amazing that there was only the number of deaths that there actually were.
Yeah, because, it happens as the circus is going on. And, whenever you go to a circus, there's usually so much activity. There's so much going on that you are trained, you are focused, you are oblivious to everything around you because, for instance, I think during the time that the actual fire started, you've got tightrope walkers that are performing. The flying Wallingas or something. And I think that's one of the guys that crossed the Niagara Falls, I think, and done some really crazy stuff. So you're mesmerized. Oh my gosh, what happens if they fall off this tightrope? They're going to die. You're focusing on death of the performer, that you're not observant of everything that is going around you. And so when a fire begins, well, not many people are paying attention to that because it was the opposite vantage point from where everybody was trained in their viewpoint.
Yeah, my understanding, the Lion Act had just finished, and this other act had begun. They were about an hour, maybe a little less than an hour. Let me try to find out my notes. Maybe less than an hour or two into the show, and this performance begins, and there is a spark or a small fire that's noticed over where the lions had been performing. And they do try, it's less than an hour into the show, and they do try to alert people. I don't know what kind of sound system they would have had. Did they have electric sound systems in 1944?
They did, because one of the things that happens is the what do they call the person? The ringmaster.
Ringmaster,
He
yeah.
actually is trying to tell everybody, let's exit orderly and no
Hmm.
need to worry. But that the fire has caused the microphone to short out, and
Yeah.
so they can't hear him. But I thought one of the other things is that the circus would bring a band, and the
Hmm.
band was required to play the Stars and Stripes Forever. And if that song was played, then the performers and the people running the show, that was a sign that, hey, something has gone wrong. There is an emergency and we need all hands on deck. And
Yeah.
so they start playing that, but the power's out, nobody hears. And next thing you know is everybody does exactly what is going to happen when somebody yells fire. Everybody is going to not be orderly. There is going to be a stampede trying to get out. And as we mentioned earlier, yes, there were multiple exits, but a lot of the exits were blocked by the equipment, by other animal things. I
Hmm.
mean, everybody's trying to get out of the main entrance.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think hurt a lot of people, ended up killing a lot of people, because people died because of the fire, but people also died because they jumped from a high, the bleachers or something that were pretty high up. They jumped from that, they were trampled, whatever the case may be. But one of the things that I think also killed a lot of people, especially those that were burned to death, was the speed at which this fire spread. When it hit that tent, and that tent material, which was covered in that gasoline chemical that was on the tent, that fire, that tent literally just in seconds went up. So it was a very fast thing. It wasn't like people in the audience had a lot of time to prepare for what they were going to do. No, this was something that it happened very quick. And I remember hearing that people, that literally pieces of burning tent would fall down on people as they were trying to escape. So it happened very, very fast. The good news for some, well, let's not get to that yet, but it happened very fast. The good news, though, is that, out of 7,000 some odd people who were at the show, the death toll, very tragic as it was only around, what, 170 people that died as a result of this, and around 685 people injured. And considering what happened and how fast it happened, that those numbers are actually amazing.
They said that the tent collapsed in about
Yeah,
8 minutes.
yeah, it was
And so
fast.
you imagine most of the people that were there, according to the reports, were women and children, as you had
Hmm.
mentioned. And one of the first things that you are imagining is as this fire, I mean, as you said, a matchbox, it just goes up. Well, you're trying to find your children. It gets
Hmm.
dark. You're trying to find the exit. But let's also remember
Hmm.
there are like lions and tigers and other
Hmm.
things that are at the circus. And actually, they had some that were actually in the tent. And so, in your mind, you're thinking, I've got to get out of here, but I know that there are some animals in here. I don't
Hmm.
know which way to go. I haven't really paid attention to emergency exits or whatever. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot going on. And one of the survivors' reports talks about how some of the people were just running in circles
Yeah.
because they didn't know where to go. Others were like, hey, he said be orderly, so I'm going to be orderly. And they just sat there because
Hmm.
where were they going to go? What were they going to do? So
Yeah.
this was basically being contained in an environment where some people simply could not get out. And it is a terrible picture because, one of the things is in the newspapers, it was an image of a clown that was trapped and was holding a water bucket. And that's kind of where they had that idea of the day that the clowns cried, which is extremely sad because while it's so big, trying to get 7,000 people out of one door, it's not a good setup.
No, and one of the children that died in the fire, as far as I know, remains unidentified. There's they had a picture of her body. She was only known as Little Miss 1565, which was the identification number of her body. But you could see pictures of her body. They took that picture around. The police did. They took her fingerprints, her footprints, dental records. They went around and tried to find what her real name was, who she was, and she remains, you know, to this day, nobody knows who she was, which makes you think maybe her mom and father were both killed in the fire there at the circus.
Yeah, something to the point where I believe that there was such that she was, I think you like the face of the fire.
Yeah, yeah, she
Um,
was.
but let's talk about how does it start? I mean, what causes the fire?
That's interesting because the guy who was the vice president of Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey at the time, which of course at this time was still owned by the Ringling family, um, James Haley was his name. Him and a bunch of other, I guess, top level management people were charged with neglect, with negligence, and they were found guilty. And some of them, including Haley, spent some time in jail as a result of the fire. Basically, it was determined that they had acted in negligence, that they had put the public in danger. But he is, this happens in 1944. He is out of prison or out of jail by 1945, just a little over a year later. Because remember, this happens in July 44. He's out of jail by December 45, and is actually, even once he gets out of jail, he's made the president of the circus of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. He's made the president of the circus, and he spends a number of years after that managing the show before going into politics. But there was, initial prosecutions, but then, and I think this is where you're going, this is what you're going for, is there was a man who came forward who claimed he had set the fire.
Yeah, he's 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And he goes forward and he says, "Hey," he actually confesses. He says, "I did it." And they say, or he said that he had had a nightmare, and he had had a Native American that had told him that he needed to go and set fires, and he just did it. He
He,
didn't really.
he said he had been an arsonist since he was 6 years of age, and that his name was Robert Seegey of Ohio. He claimed that he had been an arsonist since he was 6 years old. He was found guilty, Chris, and sentenced to 44 years in prison.
Now that was for another fire that he
Oh,
said
that was for a
that
different
was
fire?
in Ohio. So yes, because that happened in 1950.
Yeah.
He went and set another fire, and he said, "Listen, I'm a guy who I just set fires." But
Yeah.
the police basically said, this guy. I hate to say it, but even in 1944, they were saying that he had a mental illness and that he was, saying a lot of things that did not make sense. And so he still said, I think he died in 1997, and he said, I didn't do it. He tried to recant, he tried to change his mind, but also I sure would like to know what kind of fire he set that caused him to go to jail for 44 years of prison time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. His conscience will certainly playing havoc on him, regardless of whether he really set the Ringling Brothers fire or not. Um,
and
he
the sad thing is that I think what probably causes it is what causes a lot of wildfires today, and that is a carelessly flicked cigarette.
Yeah.
You imagine during the time 1940,
Mhm.
we're in World War II. We've got a lot of things happening. Cigarettes was kind of the go-to thing to kind of help people make it, and circus performers, people. I mean, you just one of those things because the wind was blowing heavy that day, and you just get a little flick of a cigarette, and you might have stomped it out, you might have snuffed it out, but smoke starts to build. Next thing you know, catches hold of that paraffin wax, and it's gone.
So now this event did have an impact, as you can imagine, on the circus and what they were doing. They did pause shows for a little while, but it wouldn't be that many more years before Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey ceased operations under the Big Top. In 1956, they held their final Big Top show, and by 1957, they had moved to indoor building shows, arena shows. Which, interesting enough, Chris, I learned that there were people who were upset about that. They said you can't have a circus in a building; you can only have a circus in a tent. But Ringling Brothers, one of the reasons they did decide to move to arenas was this fire. You know, what happened as a result of running the show under the Big Top in Hartford, Connecticut. Like I said, amazing it hadn't happened before that.
And you still see some circus that go into
Yeah.
towns nowadays that still do the Big Top. However, the guidelines that are put into place are very strenuous to make sure that something like this does not happen again, because it truly was an American tragedy because of the people that were impacted by the
Yeah.
fire. People going just to enjoy entertainment, just a night out under the Big Top. You know, that was all that it was about, to see the clowns, the animals, and
Mhm.
trapeze artists and tight ropes. And next thing you know, in 8 minutes, life
All
changes
gone.
forever.
Yeah, life can change forever really, really quick. It reminds me when I was working on this, it reminds me in 2003, the station club fire there in Rhode Island. Reminds me of that very much. The sort of, you know, these horrible tragedies that happen when people are just sort of out having fun. Speaking of out having fun, Chris, Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey, the brand new show, was around here. I've seen it twice, but the last time it was around here, it was in a local arena. This was what, back in March?
Yes.
Chris and I were at the same show in the same arena, probably what, 3 or 4 aisles separated,
Maybe.
and did not know the other one was there. I was with a group, he was with a group. We were on the same side of the same arena at the same show and didn't even know it.
Yeah, but it's probably that clown makeup you had on, and I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I mean, you're at a place in an arena where there's circus people. I just sort of blend right in, so it just didn't.
Well, you did, and I will say I was hesitant about it because I remembered the good old days of the
Right,
circus,
right.
and I was hesitant, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like it. However, I am one to say I thought that was one of the best
Yep,
shows I have ever seen,
yep,
and I would have paid money to have gone and seen it again, right again. I would have stayed there and watched it again. Same
yep.
acts, same thing. I would have watched it again because the amount of talent that is out there now, still
Mhm.
some of the same stuff, but there's some new stuff that's out there. But it still had the charm of the clowns. It still had the death defying,
Mhm.
events. But it was just a good, wholesome time.
It
I
was.
miss the animals. I will not acknowledge I miss the animals, but I enjoy the experience.
Yeah, it was. I saw it twice. The time we saw it at the same time, and then about a year before I had seen it twice, and both times I walked away just completely impressed with what they had done. Because when they talked about, okay, we're not going to have traditional clowns, we're not going to have animals, we're not going to have a ringmaster, you sort of go, mm. But when I saw it, last year and this year, like you said, it was top notch. It wasn't something that, oh, I walked away disappointed. It was a very, very good show. And I can't wait to see their next show. They said they're going to start a new show in January, so I can't wait to see that one as well.
Yeah, and I do think it is interesting that in one of their final performances before they had the pause, before these
Mm-hmm,
last ones,
mm-hmm.
that they went back to Hartford, that they
Yeah,
actually went back to Hartford, and during its final tour, they actually had a final performance there because in Hartford, there is a permanent memorial that is
mm-hmm.
there. There is, remembrances there. And so I do applaud Ringling Brothers for not forgetting the tragedy
Right.
of what took place there and trying to, make amends for that unfortunate, terrible tragedy.
Yeah, and it is important to note that it's not the same people. That was the Ringling family. that owned it at the time. Now it's the Feld family that has owned it since the late 60s, I believe.
Right.
Well, Chris, this has been a very interesting episode. At one point, I thought, my gosh, we have just taken this down. This is like depressing, but I think it turned out to be a very good episode.
Well, I mean, you can't clown around when you're talking about a tragedy of the circus fire.
We've been waiting for that. Well, we hope you'll share this episode with your family and friends. Check us out on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
We'll talk to you later.